He, Dacey, and Tyrion had spoken most of the night about how to broach the subject of the Masters with Oberyn. Jenna would speak to Olenna, but it would have to be him rather than Jon who spoke to the Dornish prince. Which brought up another issue. Oberyn had blamed Arthur for Elia, but he was the one in the Red Keep, and he knew that whatever blame he may assign to Arthur, he'd be assigned just as much. In the end, he'd agreed with Dacey that it was time to tell Oberyn the truth of that day, and deal with the consequences. So they had broken their fast, Jon speaking to Sorella and Marjorie while Sansa spoke to Loras. Oberyn and his daughters, having stayed at the Rock the night before, sat across from him. As he got up to walk to Oberyn's table, he saw Jon look at him, and he smiled, getting a nod in return. "Prince Oberyn, I wonder if we could speak in private," he said. And the prince looked at him before standing and following when he walked from the hall. They were walking silently towards his solar when Ghost suddenly appeared by his side, and Jaime couldn't help but chuckle. He had no fear. The prince would seek to harm him, but still it was nice to see Jon being careful. Oberyn, too, seemed to have found an appreciation for Ghost, knowing what he now did about the prince's fight with the mountain. He was not surprised. They entered his room, and he took his seat before offering the prince some water, which he declined. "There are some things we found out, Oberyn. Some things which have been brought to light and require us to deal with them. Some of them Jon has had to deal with, and they have caused him great pain." Jaime began, and saw Oberyn's frown. "What pains my nephew so?" Oberyn said, and Jaime raised his hand for a moment. "In time. First, there is something I need to tell you, something I realize now I should have spoken out on years ago." He told him then of the events of the sack, of how Aerys had wildfire spread all through the city, of how he ordered them to be set off, of how he wanted to burn them all. He told him of his killing Rosard and then Aerys, and being a fool who thought his job done, how he had never imagined his father capable of such acts. He didn't beg forgiveness or even seek any. He had gotten that from the only people who mattered to him, nor did he seek understanding, though he'd have welcomed it. It was simply the act of telling the truth which he sought. "You and I will never be friends, Jaime. Never will I seek your company other than when it's necessary, nor will I ever forgive. Don't get me wrong. I understand what you did and why you did it, and had I been there, I may have done the same in your position. But she was my sister. My niece and nephew were lost to me because you sat on a throne to deal with your actions rather than went to them." "I know," Jaime said, "but also it's because of you. I see the boy she called her son raised to be a king. I see my niece live on, albeit far differently than I'd have hoped. I've seen justice delivered to those who murdered my family, so because of that, I bear you no ill will, nor shall I ever raise my blade against yours. We are not friends, but we are allied by the same cause." "That my prince is enough," Jaime said, and Oberyn nodded. "Now this other thing?" Jaime reached into his drawer and took out the Maester's journal and the relevant letters Tyrion had put aside, and handed them to Oberyn, motioning for him to read them. They sat there for what seemed to be hours, Jaime pouring the prince wine while he himself drank water. At one point he saw the prince's temper begin to fray and watched on as Ghost basically pushed up against him, Oberyn's hand stroking the wolf's fur, calming him down. When he eventually finished reading, Jaime watched as Oberyn swallowed his wine before standing to his feet. "Jon, he knows of this?" he asked. "Aye. He took it badly, no?" "He did," my aunt spoke to him. "It was for the best that it was her rather than I. I'll speak to Ilaria. She too would be better for him than my anger, I feel." Oberyn retook his seat. "These fuckers are the cause, these learned men. Them and the Falcon. It is them even more so than the Fat Stag or even your father. Them and Jon Arryn who are responsible." Oberyn said, and Jaime could see the fire in his eyes. "I believe so. My brother thinks they acted independently, but I'm not so sure." Tyrion is right. Those fools at the Citadel think their cleverness is unique to them. They look down on those without a chain and even those who have a... Oberyn said, drifting off into thought. Oberyn, your maester. How long has he been here? More than 20 years, he delivered Tyrion, Jaime said, and jumped to his own feet, almost running to the door, only for both Oberyn and Ghost to stop him. Let me past Martell, or there will be blood spilled in this room, he said angrily, and Ghost pushed him back towards the table. Calm yourself, Jaime. Now is not the time. We need proof, Oberyn said. Proof? This man may have killed my mother. I'll get proof if I have to force it from his tongue with my own hands. And should he not be part of it, then you would have harmed an innocent man. No, we must find a better way, and I think I know one. Oh, the links. The links he's forged. Does he have a Valyrian link on his chain? I don't know, but if so, what difference does that make? Only a maester interested in magic can forge one. These maesters hate magic. That's why they hate the dragons. So, should your maester have one, then perhaps he is to be trusted. And your own does not, Oberyn said, shaking his head. Jon said he had a way to find out about Crelin. Would he have thought of this? Jaime asked, and Oberyn nodded. Perhaps we should talk, all of us. This must be dealt with. This, and then Aaron. Oberyn said, his voice firm. After Oberyn left, he was immediately joined by Tyrion, who was eager to know how things went, after he told him what happened. Tyrion got a dark look on his face, one which he had no doubt he too had been wearing only a little while ago. Crelin has no Valyrian link, Tyrion said, looking to him. Oberyn's right. Tyrion, we need to speak on it, all of us. Jon told Jenna he had a way of knowing about Crelin. We should ask him to find out before we do anything. Jaime said. And if he's part of it, if he was involved with Mother's death, then they'll hear his screams all the way back in the Citadel, brother. Jon. He had spent most of the night before speaking to Ashara, and his cousin Cregan seemed a good lad, and he looked forward to introducing him to everyone else. He had even asked Jon to spar and was disappointed when he told him of his arm, though he had seemed excited when Jon told him of Loras and Brienne, and how they'd be staying here at the Rock too. I can meet them soon? Cregan asked. How about you settle in for a day or so, and then I'll take you to them. That sounds good, cousin, Cregan said with a smile. About that, you know why we can't say that in front of Sansa? I know. I wish it didn't have to be like this. It won't be for long, I promise. And once she and Marjorie have left for Highgarden, then you can call me cousin freely. Really, I thought, Mother said. He said, looking to his mother, who was speaking to Arthur. We'll work it out. Loras knows who I am, and joy will take to you better knowing you're related to me. As for Brienne, well, you being my cousin won't matter, but Cregan, she doesn't know the truth, so no mention of my real name, he said, and Cregan nodded. After that, he had talked to Ashara, only briefly promising to have dinner with her, Cregan and Lady Melisandre the next night. His aunt was just like the stories he'd heard of her, and he could see why his uncle had fallen for her. When he had asked if she would tell him of Brandon, she had said she would, but had asked for some time before she did so. Lady Melisandre and her guards had been another matter. Jon was getting used to people who knew the truth about him deferring to him, but how they looked at him unnerved him. My prince, we have brought gifts for you from our lord, Melisandre said as one of her guards pointed to some boxes. Rhaeos sent gifts to me? He asked, surprising her by knowing the Red God's name. You already know of our lord? I've spoken to a Red priest, Thoros of Myr. When Arthur told me you were coming, I wished to know more, and Thoros was here for the tourney. Thoros is a false priest, my prince. He may have steered you wrong. He did not, my lady, but I'm sure we can speak more of it at a later time. Of course, my prince. She set her smile full. My prince, may I ask a question? You may. Sir Arthur's letter, it said, The dragon had said, "You've already hatched the dragon, is this true?" "It is, my lady. My sister is in my room," Jon said, and she looked at him confused. "It's a long story, my lady, and I will tell you all of it. And when we have less guests, I'll arrange for you to see her for yourself," he said, as she bowed her head, smiling all the while. Now, after breaking his fast, he had considered going to see Jaime, he and Oberyn having not returned. But when he closed his eyes and went looking for Ghost, he found them to be still speaking, the earlier warning he'd given seeming to have worked. Joy wished for them to go riding, but thankfully Jenna took her and Sansa to their lessons. Marjorie, though, decided to stay, and Jon was sure that was because of Sorella. When he had told her of Sorella staying at the Rock when Oberyn left, and what the reasons were, Marjorie had been as supportive as always. However, he had noticed that this morning as they ate, that his friends seemed most displeased by how Sorella was almost taking all his attention. The girl was non-stop questions, and Jon felt he would need to introduce her both to Rhaenys and Tyrion soon as both could sate her curiosity. "Perhaps we should go talk in my room, all of us?" he said quickly, looking to Marjorie, who nodded in agreement. "Aye, sounds like a plan," Loras said. And as they got up to leave, a tired-looking Brienne arrived to break her own fast. "You're all leaving?" she said a little sadly. "We've all eaten. This will not do, Brienne. This lateness will not be tolerated," Loras said in his best mock Jenna impression. The slap Jon giving him, making Brienne's worried look turn to a chuckle. "Ouch. You wound me so, Jon," Loras said over-exaggeratedly, only for Marjorie to slap him too. "I know where I'm not wanted." "Very well, Brienne. I shall stay and watch you eat," Loras then said, making her laugh. "Why would I want you to stay?" Brienne said, and Loras looked aghast before breaking into laughter. "Perhaps because afterwards we can go spar?" he said, and she smiled broadly at that. Jon left with Marjorie and Sorella and walked down to his room, both girls almost, but not speaking to each other when finally Sorella broke the silence. "You've met Jon's sister, my lady." "Of course," Marjorie said, and Jon couldn't help but smirk at the proud look on her face. "What's she like?" Sorella asked, not noticing it herself. "You're about to find out. We're here," he said. He led her into the room, Marjorie following behind, and just as he saw Sorella look around confused when she didn't see her, Rhaenys made her appearance, and Sorella's reaction was so unlike anyone else's. "She's so beautiful, cousin, you're so beautiful," she said, almost cooing at his sister. Rhaenys chirped loudly, and Jon broke out in laughter, forcing both Sorella and Marjorie to look his way. "She said, of course she is," he said, and both girls giggled. Marjorie took a seat in the chair that had been brought to replace the one Rhaenys had set alight, while Sorella knelt down and looked at Rhaenys. She asked before she touched her, before she held her wings, all the while looking at his sister with a look of awe on her face. When Rhaenys said she was hungry, Jon sent for the uncooked meat, and when it was brought to him, he held a piece on the spike and looked to her. "Dracarys," he said. And Rhaenys blew a small flame, cooking the meat instantly. Marjorie and Sorella both gasped when they saw it, and Jon fed his sister before repeating it again. She chirped at him, and he looked to her before answering. "You're sure?" he said, and she chirped again in response. "Marjorie, would you like to try?" he asked, and she looked at him with a bit of concern before nodding. "I should hold it out in front of her like this," he said, showing her. "Then say Dracarys." "Dracarys, aye," he said, and then watched on, making sure her hand was well away from where the flame would go. He found himself not even looking at the flames, and instead watching as Marjorie's smile appeared on her face before taking the piece of meat and feeding Rhaenys. Sorella looked just as eager to try, and once Rhaenys gave her permission, Jon had her repeat the process. After Rhaenys had eaten her fill, Sorella asked if she could take some notes. So Jon got some parchment and quills, and once Rhaenys had told him it was all right to leave her, he went to get his present for Jorah and Lyanna's babe. Carrying it was a problem. But Jorah was more than willing to do that for him. So he told Sorella he'd be back in a while, and he and Marjorie and Jorah walked to where Jorah's rooms were. "Where did you find that?" "There's a man in Lannisport, a carpenter. He does great work, so I gave him the idea for the decorations and he made it for me. It's very pretty," she said as they reached the room. Knocking on the door, they waited a moment until Jorah opened it. He invited them in, and they found Lanise putting clothes in her chests while Gerald slept. "My lord, my lady, I had this made for Gerald," Jon said as Jorah placed the crib on the ground. It was made of a light wood, and around it images of baby bears had been engraved, each of them in various different poses. Jorah looked at it and seemed to Jon to admire the craftsmanship, while Lanise paid more attention to the designs themselves. "I thank you, Jon, that's very thoughtful," Lanise said, smiling. "As do I. A wonderful gift. Jon, thank you." They stayed and talked for a bit, Marjorie speaking to Lanise, while Jorah asked to speak to Jon in private. Heading into the other room, he was stunned when Jorah pledged his fealty, not because of the act itself, more because he had felt there had been no need to do so. But Jorah had insisted. And so Jon welcomed it and pledged his own support back. With that done, and after saying goodbye to them both, he and Marjorie decided to go back to the others. They stopped up at his room to check everything was well, and found Sorella and Rhaenys getting along, or more precisely, found Sorella writing while Rhaenys slept. They then met up with Joy and Sansa, who had finished their first lessons, and together they headed out to the sparring yard where they knew Loras and Brienne would be. Olenna, being invited to lunch by Jenna would normally be a good thing, but as soon as she arrived, she knew something was on the woman's mind. Still, they ate first and spoke of more minor things, and then, once they were done, Jenna turned to her. "We found out some things, Olenna, some terrible things, and I feel it's best for you to know of them," Jenna said, and Olenna nodded. "I take it this is concerning Jon," she said. "It affects him, Olenna, but more. It's about his family and the people who've done everything in their power to destroy them." "We'll deal with the Stag and Falcon, Jenna. Have no fear of that. The Fat Oaf was just a puppet. Olenna Jon Arryn, though, was far more involved, but on them we can wait. No, I'm talking of the Maesters. What did the Grey Rats do?" she said, clearly showing her distaste for them. Jenna told her it all then, how they'd been working against Jon's family on both sides, of Rhaella and her troubles giving birth, or Lyara being allowed, if not helped, to die. She told her of Rhaegar knowing the Maesters were working against his family, and of him planning to do something about it once he was king. When she told her of Lyanna Stark, of the reasons why she had no Maester in that tower, Olenna had heard enough. "That poor boy," she said softly. He took it badly?" "He did, but Jamie says he's resilient, and he's right, he is, but it's more than that, determined, driven. I don't know what to call it, but he needs us to help deal with this, to come up with a way. It's a pity his dragons isn't big enough. She could burn the Citadel down." Olenna said, only half joking. "Olenna, these Maesters, we can't trust them. And what's worse is we now have to consider everything that occurred under their purview, everything they've been responsible for. Every act that we dismissed as just being a normal part of life. We have to look at it again and ask ourselves if it was," Jenna said. It took Olenna a moment to really consider what Jenna had just said, and then when she did, she shuddered. She had miscarried herself before Mace was born. Twice, in fact, Joanna Lannister had died birthing Tyrion. Accidents, fate perhaps. But what if it was more? Everything, every single aspect of their lives were in some way affected by the Maesters, their messages, education, health, even in some cases their future plans. She reached over to take a sip of her tea and dropped it to the ground, smashing the cup, when a horrifying thought hit her. "Olenna?" Jenna asked worriedly. "Marjorie, I'll not let them near my granddaughter," she said, standing up. "Olenna?" "I don't." Jenna said before she apparently figured out what Olenna was thinking of. We'll fix this long before then, Olenna. Oh, we most certainly will, Jenna, starting now. Your own maester, is he a part of this? We don't know. We've taken steps, and John says he has a plan to find out about Kraylin. A plan? I don't know, Olenna. But do you think any of us are more invested in this than John? No, but we should meet, though, all of us. We will. Jaime is telling Prince Oberyn, and he'll be with us on this. Jenna said a little hesitantly. Good. No one knows vengeance like a Martell. You have no objection to him. I may not like the man for what he did to Willis, but it was an accident, and my grandson and he speak regularly. Did you stop your support of the crown? Jenna asked as Olenna sat back down, of one crown. Yes, not the true one, though, Olenna said with a half-smile on her face. The Falcon's not going to be pleased. He'll make a move soon. I know. That's something else we need to discuss. We will. After finishing lunch, she found herself in a dark mood for most of the day, her thoughts going back and forth on every single action Lomies had taken over the years, every one of them being examined in her head. She couldn't find too much fault with them, and that both comforted and bothered her. The maester who had been there when she miscarried was long since dead, and she couldn't remember much of him or the circumstances. It couldn't be the entire order, though, was the conclusion she came to. Some of those men were relatives of her family, of other great and small houses, had some been brought in on it, then they'd have told others by now. So it was a select few, which meant that they'd need to weed them out root and stem, but how? Who could they trust? One wrong word and the rats would go scurrying off. No, this would need to be handled much more cleverly than that. At dinner that night she was quiet, and both Marjorie and Loras commented on it. She smiled and waved off their concerns, telling them she was just tired, and then she took an early night. Though she found sleep was hard to come by, instead she wondered just how far, just how deep this conspiracy went. She couldn't free her mind of certain thoughts, and the more she looked at them, the truer they felt. This wasn't just a conspiracy to be rid of the dragons or the Targaryens. This was a conspiracy to establish control, to make Westeros function according to how they wished it to. So while the Targaryens were no doubt their main target, they wouldn't have been their only ones. They'd have sought to control the fates of other houses, of the Reach and the West, the Stormlands and beyond. Given what Jenna had said, this was certainly true of the North. But what steps had they taken in her home? What moves had they made, and for how long had they been making them? Gregan. Meeting his cousin had been just how he hoped. Jon was his age, and while he had enjoyed being with Ned, he looked forward to testing his skills against boys of his own age and size. He had been disappointed when Jon had told him he wouldn't be able to spar for a bit, but finding out there were others here he could spar with had made up for that somewhat. As he readied himself to break his fast, he felt his excitement build. He'd meet another of his cousins soon, even if he couldn't tell her the truth yet. He walked down to the small dining room, looking forward to the meal and remembering the one they'd had last night. His mother and uncle and Jon had sat, ate and told stories most of the night. Lady Melisandre had eaten with them, but quietly, just staring at Jon intently. Seeing how his uncle followed Jon once they'd eaten had brought it home to him. That Jon wasn't just his cousin. He was a king. His cousin would sit a throne one day. "Morning, son? Hungry?" his mother asked when he reached the room. "I am, mother," he said, kissing her cheek and taking a seat. "Are you nervous about today?" she asked him, and he nodded as he stuffed his mouth with eggs.
"You shouldn't be, son. You'll do well here."
"I know. It's just a pretense. It's needed for now. You know why." "I do, and I understand. I'm just worried I may make a mistake, say something I shouldn't." Follow Jon's lead. He's been hiding who he is for longer than you have. Look to him if you feel awkward or worried, she said. Doll. They had just finished when his uncle and Jon arrived, another boy with him of the same age. Cregan looked at the smiles on Jon's and the other boy's face and felt a little less nervous. "Morning, Kragan. This is my friend Loris," John said as he walked over to say his hellos. "Loris," he said, looking as the other boy sized him up. "Aye, he'll do," Loris said, and he looked to John, wondering what the boy meant, only to see his cousin hit the boy on the shoulder. "I said, make him feel welcome," John said. "I did, sorry, Kragan. It was supposed to be a jape," Loris said, and he nodded. He said his goodbyes to his mother and followed them to the lift, taking it to a higher floor. As they got out of it, he saw the largest dog he'd ever seen sitting there waiting for him, a black pup by its side. Looking at the dog closer, he felt something at the back of his head, something telling him it wasn't a dog. It was a wolf. He was staring at it when he felt the tongue on his hand, and as he lowered his head to see what it was, he found the black pup looking up at him. He knelt down and brushed his hand over its fur, feeling as if this was the most natural thing in the world, as if this was what he was supposed to do. The wolf clearly felt it too as it moved even more closely to him. Hearing a cough behind him broke the spell though, and he stood straight again. "This is going to be a problem," he heard John say as he looked at him with a small frown. "Why?" "We knew the pup would find someone eventually," Loris said. "Aye, but not with Sansa here. I can explain who Kragan is, but given how he looks, given the wolf, it'd be too much." "Treff, I don't understand," he said, looking to John. "You look like a Stark, perhaps even more than I do, other than your eyes being your mother's color, your uncle's. So that will throw people off for now. But with the wolf, gods." Wanting to cause this trouble on only his first proper day here. "Is there nothing you can do, John? With Ghost?" Loris said, and he watched as John looked to the white wolf. "Aye, maybe." He watched as John closed his eyes, saw him smile, and then a small and then larger frown appeared on his face before he smiled again. A moment later, the black pup and the white wolf seemed to look at each other. He saw the black pup growl before the white wolf gripped him on the neck. Without thought, he made a move to the black pup only for Loris to hold him back, and then the white wolf let go of its grip. The black pup walked over to him, licking his hand once more before it, and the white wolf walked away. "What just happened?" he asked, turning to John. "It's a long story, Kragan. For now, Ghost will look after him until my sister leaves. Then it'll be up to you." "Me?" "Aye. It seems you're a true wolf, and he's chosen you." "Chosen? I don't understand," he said and looked to his uncle, who seemed as lost as he was. John explained how all the Starks had a direwolf. His own was called Ghost, his cousin's Fang. There was also a Nymeria, Summer and Grey Wind with his other cousins, and now the black one was apparently his. He felt something much different then. He was one of them. He was a Stark. It was one thing for his mother or even uncle to say so. Even hearing it from John only went so far. But the wolves who chosen his cousins had done the same for him. "What's his name?" he asked, excited to get to know his new friend, even if it would have to wait. "That's up to you to decide," John said. "Dusk," he said firmly only a moment later. "Dusk?" Loris asked. "From dusk to dawn house, Dane stands ready at their king's side," he said, and saw both his uncle and the two boys smile at him. "Aye, you'll fit right in here," John said, patting him on the shoulder. They walked on through the hall and out into a courtyard. He saw a large blonde girl practicing forms while 3 other girls looked on, one of whom had bright red hair and a small gray wolf pup playing at her feet. Sansa, his cousin. He knew immediately. When a smaller blonde saw them, she waved and called out John's name, and he saw the brown-haired girl smile, as did Sansa. He tried to swallow down his nervousness as they walked over. Sansa, Marjorie, this is Cregan. He's Sir Daeron's nephew and will be squiring for him, he said, and while that hadn't been agreed yet, he looked to his uncle to see him nod, and he felt his excitement grow even more at the thoughts of it. Lord Cregan, a pleasure, Sansa said with a curtsy. It's just Cregan, my lady, he said, and she nodded while he introduced himself to Marjorie. And this little terror here is Joy, Jon said as Joy stood beside him. Hello, Joy, he said. And the girl smiled and bid him hello back. Cregan. That's a northern name. Our great-great-great-grandfather was called Cregan, Sansa said. You've been studying your history, but I think you missed a grade in there, little sister, Jon said, and he laughed when Sansa stuck her tongue out at him. How rude. Wasn't that rude? Joy, let's show how it's supposed to be done, Jon said. And then both he and Joy stuck their tongues out at Sansa, making her and the rest of them laugh. We win, Jon said then as he gave the blonde a hug. He ended up talking far more than sparring for the rest of the day. Though he did spar too. He was rusty though, and both Loras and Brienne were of a standard he'd not been used to. In the end though, he'd taken his spar with Loras only just, and lost to Brienne. Again, though the fight was close. That night he had been invited to dinner with the rest of his family. He sat with Jon, Sansa, and the others while his mother and Lady Melisandre sat with Prince Oberyn's daughters. The prince himself spent most of the night looking at both his mother and uncle, while also gazing suspiciously at Lady Melisandre, and that he wasn't the only one, and he saw Jon whisper in Marjorie's ear more than once. After dinner he saw Jon, Marjorie, and Sansa leave with Joy, and it was Loras who told him of the stories Jon would tell the girl each night. By the time he went to bed that night he was spent, and he fell asleep not long after laying down, looking forward eagerly for the morrow. Oberyn. Seeing Ashara Dane had been the first of his surprises tonight, seeing a red priestess in Casterly Rock. His second, why she was here, he knew not, but he had dealt with them in Essos, and he found it disturbed him to see her. What he found even more disturbing was seeing how she spent the whole night almost staring at Jon, watching his every move, his every expression, as if she was memorizing it. Ellaria noticed his gaze and mistook it for interest, and he couldn't in some ways fault her for thinking that, as the lady was very beautiful. She's pretty, his paramour whispered in his ear. She is. But that's not my interest. You remember them from Essos? I do. They burned people, did they not? They did. I do not like her here, nor how she looks at Jon. I know these people. They seek power, magic, and Jon has it more than anyone I've ever seen. You think she means him harm? Ellaria said worriedly, and he found himself kissing her cheek. If she does, she'll find out what it feels like to burn my love. His sister is far more adept with fire than these priests, he said, and she chuckled, just as she had when he told her of the chair Rhaenys burned. Speak to him, my love. Talk to him of the dangers. I will. Did you speak to him yourself? He asked her. Earlier I went to his room and Sorella let me in. Your daughter is only short of placing her bed next to that chest Rhaenys calls her own, she said, and this time it was he who chuckled. How was he? Better. He was glad of the concern. I could sense that. I've not ever seen such a need for family, my love. Well, he's lucky then. He has one now, he said. And she nodded in agreement. They were finishing dinner when Tyrion approached him to come to Jaime's soar. Once he'd told Ellaria, and she and his girls had taken the carriage back to Lannisport. He walked to the room. Outside, Walder Jon's giant guard stood, and when he entered, he was surprised by how full the room was. All the Lannisters were there. Targaryen and Kevan, Olenna and Jon, Arthur and he was glad to see Ashara had been asked to come too. "It is good to see you, Ash," he said, walking up to her. "You too, Oberyn," she said, smiling softly. "That lad, he is your son." "He is, mine and Brandon's. I never would have thought you to birth a babe outside the sheets," he asked, surprised. "I did not. We married, though it matters not in the end," she said sadly. "I am sorry for it, for what you lost," he said, and she smiled back at him. "As am I for your own losses, Oberyn." 4. Tryon looked to Jaime then, and when he received a nod, he began to speak. "Some of you know why we're here, and some do not, so for those who don't, bear with me. He then began to explain what they knew once again, and he saw both Ashara and Arthur get more and more agitated, seeing Arthur move to stand even closer to Jon. When he was done, the room was silent, and he moved to speak only for Jon to move quicker. "These people are the root and cause of everything I've lost. Every aunt and uncle they took from me when they murdered my grandmother's children. Every moment I lost with both of my grandmothers is because of them. What happened during the rebellion, what people in this room lost because of it, while there are others to blame, and I swear to bring them the justice they deserve in time. Without what these men did, none of it would have been possible," Jon said. Oberyn watched as Jaime looked to him concernedly, and Jon nodded as Arthur placed his hand on his shoulder. "My mother died bringing me into this world. Every day since I've learned the truth of who I am, I've had to deal with that, had to blame myself for it." "Jon, it wasn't your fault," Jenna said, and Jon nodded back at her. "I know, but I blamed myself all the same. But now I know who was truly to blame, and I need your help, all of you. Because I can't do this alone, I can't. Rhaenys wants to fly to the Citadel and burn the thing to the ground. And a part of me wishes for nothing more than that. But I can't. I can't be that man, I won't be." He wanted to go over and hug the boy himself then. He doubted if it were him he'd be able to show the same restraint. Even now, a part of him was almost willing the boy to do it, to burn them all. "Before you answer, before you make a suggestion, ever since Tyrion found out the truth of things, it's forced me to wonder more about certain events, certain circumstances which affected my family, and perhaps even yours. No doubt some of you have thought the same, so before we do anything, is there anything anyone wishes to speak about?" "Elia," Oberyn said, and saw Jon turn to him. "My sister was always ill, but when she was betrothed to your father, she got weaker still." Oberyn won. Jon said, and he shook his head. "No, I never blamed it on your father, thought it just her illness running its course, but now I find I cannot get the thought to leave my mind that maybe, just maybe," he said before shaking his head. "Doran too, he has an illness, and again our mother." Tyrion said, and Jaime nodded. "I don't know the truth of things, and like Jon, I too have blamed myself." He saw both Jenna and Jaime shake their heads, with Jenna moving closer to hug her nephew. "Lyanna," Arthur said, and they all looked to him. "My mother. I've spoken of her, Arthur. I know how my father felt about the maesters, why he didn't have one at the tower," Jon said, his voice cracking. "I know that, my king, but there's more you don't know," he said, and Jon nodded to him to continue. "When we were in Tower, when we tried to stop things, when we realized the letters hadn't made it, Lyanna told us of the ravens she'd sent, of the messages to Winterfell, how they must have been intercepted. But now, hearing this, given what Wallace was doing, I wouldn't be surprised if he destroyed them," Jaime said, and Ashara gasped. "Ash?" Arthur asked worriedly. "Wallace, he was. Brandon knew he was doing something. He said he had proof, but his father wouldn't listen. The room went silent for a bit, as people tried to make sense of things. It was Olenna who in the end cut through it all, and he was surprised to see her walk and place a comforting hand on Jon's shoulder before she spoke. This gets us nowhere, and while knowing fills us with a desire to take vengeance, and I too had such a desire from the moment Jenna told me. But despite the hurt we feel, the past is the past, and while we can have vengeance or justice for it, we can do nothing to change it. So we should forget it, Oberyn said a bit angrily. No, we use it to fuel us and move on. But it's the future which worries me, which scares me somewhat. Our king just told us of what they did to his family, which begs the question, what will they do knowing he survives, knowing he's brought a dragon back into this world? That's why we're here, my lady, Tyrion said. I know why we're here. What I'm trying to say is, on this, we had better get it right. No mistakes, no room for doubt. It's not the lies of the past that concern me. It's the lies of the future. My kings, my families, mine own, all of them concern me. See, she said, and he saw people nod as she squeezed Jon's shoulder once again before walking and retaking her seat. We need to find if there are maesters we can trust. My grand uncle at the wall is one. Luwin at Winterfell and Loamara, who used to be maester at Dragonstone, are others. Jon said. How can you be sure of any of them, my king, apart from your uncle? Arthur asked. Loamara delivered Rhaenys, Luwin. I know well, but both he and my grand uncle also have something in common. Valyrian links, Oberyn said, and Jon nodded. Valyrian links? Jenna asked. Studies in magic. I believe anyone with a link in this may be on our side, or at least not on theirs, Jon said. But we'll need to be sure, and to that end, there's a name in one of my father's letters, a maester recommended by my grand uncle, Marwyn. The mage, Oberyn said with a laugh. You know him? Tyrion asked. The entire citadel knows him. I can see why your uncle would name him Jon. We need to contact him. I shall go to the citadel. He'll meet with me, Oberyn said. I'll come with you, Tyrion said, and Jaime and Jenna gasped. Tyrion, people know I read a lot. Aunt, they'll assume I've come to explore the Citadel's library, and two can do more than one, he said. And Oberyn nodded to him. What of Crelin Jon? Jaime asked. It's time for Crelin to meet the dragon. My lord, after he meets Rhaenys, his true colors will show, Jon said. Far too risky, Jon. Should he manage to get a raven out, the truth will be known, and it'll be all for nothing, Olenna said. He won't get a raven out, my lady, Jon said. You can't be certain of that. If we don't reach him in time, if the raven has already left, then we'll not be able to do anything to stop it, Olenna replied. I can ensure no ravens leave here. I'll know exactly what he's doing when he's doing it. Jon replied to Olenna, and she looked at him like he was losing his mind. My lord, the window if you would. Jon replied to Olenna, if you would, he said, and Jaime opened the window. He and everyone in the room looked on as Jon closed his eyes. Some had seen him ward before, and he had seen the end results of it, but he, like everyone else, waited to see what happened next. The owl flew in, and Arthur reached for his sword when it flew towards Jon, only for Jaime to shake his head and tell him to leave it. The owl landed on his shoulder, and Tyrion directed Olenna to walk to it. Once she did, he watched as the owl walked down Jon's outstretched arm and allowed the Queen of Thrones to rub its feathers as if it was a tame bird and not a wild owl. As I said, my lady, No raven will leave this keep, I swear it, Jon said after he had allowed the owl to fly off. He saw Olenna look at Jon and smirk, and after a while they all left the room. He was soon riding back to Lannisport. He, Ilaria, and Tyrion, and some of his guards would head to Old Town and seek to speak to Marwyn and try and find out where Loamara had been sent. Olenna and Marjorie and Jon's sister would accompany them, which meant putting the journey off a bit longer as they were staying for both Jon and Loras's name day celebrations. Now all he needed to do was convince his daughters to go back to Dorne, though since they were bringing the mountain's body back with them, perhaps it wouldn't be as difficult as it could have been otherwise. Jon. Timing was everything. And with what he was about to do, he had to laugh at the sheer inconvenience of things. It had been moons since he had felt more than just a sense that things were well with the bronze egg, and now it was calling him when he needed his head clear the most. That it had happened during Lady Melisandre's visit gave him pause, but when he showed her the other egg, she had immediately shown him a passage in the book she brought. My prince, this is why you were to receive these gifts. The stones are from before the doom. They are what is required for a birthing nest. The book explains the ritual, though it had made no sense to me until now. She said, looking to Rhaenys, a true dragon will bring the fire. He said aloud, reading the passage. As it is written, my prince, you must make the bond with blood, and then on the day of your birth a dragon shall rise, she said, and he nodded, looking to Rhaenys, who chirped loudly. It seems my sister believes you, my lady, he said, and walked to the egg, taking his knife out and cutting his hand, allowing the blood fall over it. With that done, he had bound his hand, and Melisandre had left. It had meant he had needed to put off his plan with Crelin until the wound had healed, and he hadn't been able to use that hand to spar with either. So things had gone on with him, sitting the fights out and watching on as Cregan, Loras, and Brienne shared victories. Cregan was very good, but what held him back was he had not sparred against the quality he now was. In time, there was no telling just how good he'd become. He was glad to see how well he got on with Sansa, though not so much when he saw Marjorie smile or laugh at something he said. Joy, though, seemed to like him the most, and he was glad to see him make time for her, something he had been remiss on lately. His cousin had even gone riding with her, Loras and the others, giving him time to meet with Melisandre. He had to laugh at the forlorn look the black pup would give, as Ghost did as he asked, and kept him away for now. There had been some sadness when Jorah and Lindsay had left, all of them sorry to see them go, but for Jorah and Lynacy, that had turned to amazement as they were presented with the She-Bear, their very own pinnacle ship. My lord, I do not know what to say, Jorah said to Jaime. Jaime, this was my betrothal gift to my wife. My lord Daisy would like nothing more than to see her sail to Bear Island. I, cousin, show the North, the She-Bear, and how our family and Bear Island are not to be looked down upon, he said. I will. I thank you both, Jorah said as Lynesy hugged her and made her smile. The She-Bear was to be crewed by Lannister men, but soon men of Bear Island would join, and it had been filled with the first shipment of food, free, courtesy of Lady Olenna as a belated gift to Jorah and Lynesy. The day of departure had been the first time Lady Daisy had left the Rock in a while. She had been barely seen over the last few days, though. It seemed her illness was nothing to worry about, as both Jenna and Jaime had assured them. Finally, though, the time had come, and so he had walked with Arthur to see Maester Crelin, and spoke to him of something he needed him to see. Oberyn had come to the Rock to see the plan to its end, and Jon had left him and Tyrion with Jaime as this needed to look like him, and him alone. Bringing the maester to his room, he opened the door and led him inside, and when he saw Rhaenys, he reacted oddly. While there was shock and surprise, Rhaenys' chirps and how Ghost looked at him immediately put Jon on edge. How? That's impossible. They all died away? Crelin said. Not all. I asked you here because I have another egg, but it seems different, Jon said. Another. You intend to bring another dragon into the world? Of course I do. Why would I stop with one? He said, laughing before lowering his voice. I believe there are more eggs out there too. Just imagine it. The sky filled with dragons again, he said, and saw the gulp the man took. I need to consult my books, John. I don't understand this. Perhaps I have something there if you'll excuse me. A few moments after the maester left, they came in, Marjorie first, followed by her grandmother, Jenna, and Sorella. Well? Olin asked. He's with them, John said. How do you know? Jenna asked as Rhaenys chirped. A dragon knows, he said, repeating what Rhaenys said before sitting on the bed and closing his eyes. He found the mouse almost immediately. It had made itself at home in the corner of the maester's room, and so he opened the door and waited, and a few minutes later Crelin came into the room. He watched the man go to the corner where he kept his parchment and immediately begin to write before heading to the ravens. The mouse looked at the cages. The raven kept apart from the others, and John knew then that this was for Old Town. This one was different, not for their use, but for his. This was how they talked to each other. As soon as the note was tied to the raven's leg, John jumped from the mouse to it. He felt himself being held and carried to the window, felt himself be thrown from it, and he flapped his wings and headed in the direction of Old Town. He flew until he was out of sight before turning back around and landing on his window, tapping his beak against the glass. He waited until he was let in by Sorella, flying to him. John put his hands around its body as he warged out. Close the window, he said to Sorella, who did as he asked, Rhaenys' presence making the raven agitated. You need to take this somewhere for now. Go to your father and tell him it's time, John said to her, and she took the bird from his hand. How can you be sure he's wrote to them? Marjorie asked, and so he opened the note and read it aloud. Archmaester Theobald, I write with grave news. The dragons have returned. The bastard squire of my lord has shown me one, and possesses another dragon egg, which he intends to hatch. The boy is surprisingly well protected by my lord. His guards follow everywhere, and he possesses a direwolf of whom we've spoken before. The dragon is small, though, and I shall see our work done. But should I fail, then it is up to you to see Jon Snow dead, your every faithful servant, Crelin. Sorella, go now, Jenna said, and the girl ran, still holding the raven. Arthur, Jon said. And Arthur nodded to Walder to guard Jon and then ran after her. They sat there waiting for what felt like an age. Rhaenys had chirped so loudly during the reading of the note that had there not been other matters to attend to, that would have been his first course of action. But once Sorella had gone, he then walked to his sister and spoke softly to her. We are safe, sister. No one shall harm either of us. He threatened you, Jay. He wishes you dead. I'll kill anyone who dares harm you. I'll kill them all. She said, her chirps loud and angry. As would I, you, Ray. We are safe. We know what they did and what they'll plan to do, and they don't know of us. They'll not see us coming, sister. We shall bring them all fire and blood. Fire and blood, Rhaenys chirped back to him as she stroked her back. It was a few minutes later when Arthur and Sorella arrived back to tell them Crelin had been taken and locked away. Jon stroked his sister's back once more and then left her with Sorella, walking from the room with Marjorie, who held his hand to comfort. Either himself or her, he wasn't sure, though he was glad of it. When they reached the maester's rooms, they found Tyrion going through Crelin's belongings. It took him over an hour, and while he found some things, there was nothing overly incriminating. Jon reached out for Ghost, and the wolf came running. He closed his eyes and walked to Crelin's clothes, taking their scent, and then Ghost began to search the room. Looking around it, he finally found the loose panel on the wall and pushed his snout at it to draw attention to it. Oberyn walked over and kicked it loose, and they found them there. His journals. Tyrion looking at them with great interest. while John patted Ghost to thank him. "Is it the same as the other?" Olenna asked. "No. There's more than one. This covers even longer," Tyrion said as he sat down and began to race through the pages. It didn't take long, and when it came, John was sure the entirety of the rock heard the anguished cry Tyrion made. He watched as the tears fell, as the book slipped from his hand and hit the floor. Seeing the realization dawn on Jaime's face, on Jenna's, he felt powerless to offer any comfort whatsoever. Still he tried. He went to Tyrion, who was taking it the hardest, and without words he embraced him, feeling him sob against him. It took both Oberyn and Arthur to stop Jaime from leaving the room, but neither were quick enough to stop Jenna, and she practically ran from the rooms to where Crelin was being held. The maester was lucky she carried no weapons, lucky she had not spent a life fighting and sparring, but that was where his luck ran out. Jenna made up for that with fury, and she had beaten the man as badly as she was able. By the time they arrived, she had scratched his face until it was bloody and bitten him, taking part of his ear. Yet when they entered the cell, Crelin was sitting there laughing as Jenna was pulled off him, laughing even as Jaime and Tyrion arrived. "You people have no idea of the trouble you've brought upon yourselves. We took down the dragons once before. Where are the Targaryens now? You really think I'd be afraid of the scratching of cats?" Crelin said, laughing while looking at Jenna. "You think yourself clever, Maester?" Jon asked. "Cleverer than you bastard, even for all your silly toys." Jon said nothing and held up the note, seeing Crelin's smile leave his face. "What's that?" he said nervously. "That's your note to Theobald. Funny thing about ravens, you maesters train them, but you can't control them," Jon said with a laugh. "I can, though. You're a warg, among many things. Now, you, Maester, are going to tell us everything you know, and I mean everything," Jon said before turning to whisper to Olenna. "Perhaps Margaery doesn't need to see this," he said, and she nodded. "Come, my dear, let's leave them to their work," Olenna said to Margaery. "Jon, we'll speak later," he said and smiled at her as she and her grandmother left. "A bastard and a rose. It'll never happen, bastard, no matter what you may think," Crelin said, and Jon ignored him while he called for Ghost. "Ah, but he's not a bastard, Maester. You see, you didn't manage to get rid of all the dragons. My nephew lives," Oberyn said. "Impossible. Aegon was killed, everyone knows. My name is not Aegon, and you don't get to speak of my brother or my family. The tales you'll tell us will be far different, and you will speak the truth of it this night. Ah, cats, snakes, and a bastard savage. Intimidation is not among your skills, bastard." Jon said nothing, and just listened to the heaviness of the man's breathing when Ghost walked towards him, the shaking of his body and the racing of his heart. "It's time, Maester," Jon said, and Crelin gulped. "For what?" he asked shakily. "For you to face a dragon's rage," he said, and closed his eyes as Ghost bit down on the Maester's hand.